today and for your interest in a very critical topic, certainly something that affects, I'm Liz, by the way, Liz Jeffers, from Director of Baypath. Got all dressed up for you guys. This is February Liz, but anyway, critical topic, definitely affects us in the shelter world. I know some of our volunteers are here, and they know what we deal with in the shelter, but obviously something that resonates with all you guys, so we're happy that we can provide that opportunity. Just quickly want to thank Middlesex Savings Bank for sponsoring this and allowing us to be able to bring these topics to you guys, as well as Hopkins Center for the Arts for allowing us to be here, and also Hopkinton Cable Access, who always comes and takes these activities so that you can see them later if you want to look back on anything you may have missed. So with that, I want to introduce you to our speaker. Emma Parsons has been a trainer for over 20 years, specializing in reactivity, rehabbing and the training of reactive dogs, and she is a member of, ready, I can do this, Karen Pryor Academy of Animal Training and Behavior, and a faculty member of Clicker Expo, and she's the best, and so we're happy to have you, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming out this morning. First thing I want to show you is on this slide. Take my email address down in case if you have any questions after this talk today. I only have a couple hours with you, so I'm going to try to give you as much information as I can. But if there's a topic that piques your interest, or if you want more information about reactivity, I'm happy to help. So it's emma@emmaparsons.com, so it's super easy to remember, okay? So we're just going to get started because I have a lot to talk to you about today. So this is Ben. So this is the dog that got me started on all of this. I was a dog trainer for many, many years. Honestly, back then, if I heard of a dog who was doing a lot of barking and lunging, because I was teaching basic puppy classes and beginner classes, I would send them away because I did not want to deal with them. I did not know how to deal with them, and back then the whole thing frightened me. So I did not want to, there was nothing I could do to help these people who had these dogs. I got a golden retriever. His name was Ben. I bought him because I wanted to do some obedience competition work with him. I thought I did everything right. I researched the breed, found a really good breeder, went and visited the parents, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, brought him home. I will say that the first 3 to 4 months went really well. I started working with his obedience work, really happy with him. At the age of about 6 months, I noticed that he was starting to be what we would call now reactive with dogs. Back then, we called it aggression. He would be aggressive to dogs. We were walking out of a training facility one day, and it was a small corridor. And there was a little, I remember a Welsh Corgi under a chair, and they were waiting to use the ring after us. And as we were walking by, the little Welsh Corgi kind of jumped out and went, "Urgh," at Ben. And I just remember Ben looking and growling back. And I thought to myself, ooh, that's interesting. At that point, I didn't have any, history at all with dogs that would do this. The dogs that I had had thus far in my life, which were not many, would just look at the dog and say, hey, you're a weirdo, I'm just going to keep walking, right? But Ben growled back, and I thought to myself, I don't like that. But I did not reinforce it. I knew my learning theory. I did not reinforce it, and I just continued on my way, and I thought to myself, this is something that I have to keep an eye on, because this dog is going to be expected to go into tons of doggy-saturated environments being a competitor. So I really need him to work with me and not be aggressive to dogs. So a little time passed. I started taking him to some of the dog training facilities to work with him, and I started to see more and more lunging and barking at dogs. And I thought, oh no, I have a problem. I ended up going to an aggression expert who was a friend of a friend, and met this person at the park. They were having classes, and I know as I was walking to the parking lot, he was there with his dog, and Ben did his lovely barking and lunging thing, and so he came over and said, you know what, I'm going to show you how to deal with this issue. And I said, okay, great. So I hand my leash over, and unfortunately, he was met with very harsh punishment. So he was hung literally off the ground in his prong collar when he reacted. And the problem with that, and I'm going to tell you right now, back then, this is what we did. There was not much out on positive reinforcement training at all back then. And again, to be honest, I was mortified when I saw that happen. However, I thought, it has to be done. It has to be done because I can't have that behavior. So I wasn't good with it. I was horrified by it, but I thought to myself, I hope this works the way it's supposed to work, because this looks, I could never do this to my dog. So at any rate, he gets hung on the prong collar. Ben bares his teeth at this person, hangs him even harder, until now he's pretty much off the ground almost. And then Ben just surrendered, So just dropped the leash, Ben fell to the ground and proceeded to defecate, urinate, etc., glassy-eyed. And I thought to myself, and I got the leash back to me saying, you know what, that's what you need to do in the future. I thought, not going to happen. I can't do it. My dog, not going to happen. So at any rate, and the other thing that I will add to this is my husband, who only saw the harsh punishment, I'd parked the car coming up, because we were still on our way to the class. And he said to me, how could you let them do that to our dog? And I looked at him and I said, you know what, honey, I don't know. I thought this is what we did for training. I knew it was going to have to be a punishment. I never realized how hard, right? So at any rate, that's what got me onto this whole thing. Ooh, am I standing too close? Fix it, honey, fix it. Is it just that?
Just the connection.
Okay. All right, I won't touch it. But that's what got me all interested in this, because I was afraid with it. I did not want to deal with it. And now I had to deal with this dog who now is totally different. So now after this punishment, not only did I have to worry about taking him out with dogs, but he also started to aggress towards our own dogs at home, because we had 3 others at that time. And so we did have to separate them at certain times. You had to watch him, because at one point I came in from work and I had my car keys and he heard the jingling and he went right after one of our other dogs. So, this was constant and it was difficult. I ended up going to see, I will tell you, I ended up going to anything that had aggression in dogs in the title. I went all over the place, just trying to get more and more tidbits about, how to deal with this, because I knew that if it didn't get better, I would have to euthanize him. I knew that because he was not safe with my dogs at home. So at any rate, I went on my travelings, took some bits and pieces of information, and it wasn't until I met Karen Pryor, who is a world-renowned behavioral biologist. She was doing a talk for one of our dog training conferences, and I remember approaching her. She was the keynote speaker. I remember approaching her, and I said to her, I need help with my dog, and I remember being really shy about it because I'm really an introvert. I'm really shy out of this context. But she said to me, well, all you need to do is click. And I thought, okay, you don't get it. And I remember saying, you don't get it. And then I thought, I'm embarrassed that I just said that to her. But, you had to see Ben, because now when Ben saw dogs, he was not only barking and lunging, but his hackles were up, his teeth were bared, and just tons and tons of saliva would fall from his mouth. And if I didn't take him out of that situation fast enough, he would start vomiting. There have been times where I would say, well, they said if I wait a little longer, maybe I can get some behavior to reinforce. And then he'd start spitting up and vomit, so off we went. So I thought to myself, there's no way that a little click is going to help this behavior. I don't believe it. I'm very skeptical. But she gave me, she said, well, I remember her saying, he does breathe, doesn't he? And I said, oh yeah, he's breathing all right. Oh yeah, he's quite loud actually. And she said, just try to time the click when he takes a breath. And I thought, okay, this is impossible. And this can't happen. he's going to end up getting euthanized. So I left the conference that day thinking, this is not what I thought this was going to be. So as luck would have it, find out that she lives about 40 minutes from me. Back then I was in Chelmsford, not right now I'm in Upton, which is, we've been there a couple of years now. And so she was having a class in Waltham. So it was by invitation only, and she allowed me to bring Ben. And so she started to teach me how to time the click. And I'll be honest, back then, I knew nothing about clicker training. She taught that skill to me, and I was able to little by little help put that click in to reinforce that tiny little bit of quiet when he was taking a breath. And little by little, those pockets of silence grew and grew and grew, until now I did have a threshold to work with, and then I was able to continue moving forward with that. So to skip, I will tell you, I was able to compete with him in the obedience ring. I did not get as far as I wanted to with him because, he had other plans, right? We were teaching people now about reactivity and aggression. So I took that path. I'm glad I took that path because I've been able to help, and he and I have been able to help lots of people keep their dogs, which is always my goal when I work with my clients. I just want the dog in the house. No one is going to be as dedicated to your own dog as yourself. So that is always my goal when I see clients or when I do workshops, etc. So Ben, if you fast forwarded 3 or 4 years, you'd never know he had a dog aggression problem, ever. You'd never know. He was much better. We always had to watch him with dogs at home. He was able to go ahead and compete with tons of different dogs in his environment. He was my neutral dog in my reactive dog classes that I was teaching, so he was just phenomenal. And again, back then, people would say, wow, this dog was horrible in the beginning, right? Because I was president of the New England Dog Training Club back then, which is a very old AKC club. They're located in Cambridge. But I was president there. So to have this puppy who was just so difficult, and people saying, that's Ben? As those years started to come, and as they saw the work that I was doing with him, they would say, wow, that's Ben? So that is how I got started in this business, is just helping more and more people. I will be honest, back then I said, no, I don't want to help. I don't want to help. I don't want to do this. But they said, well, they're going to give the dog up. Oh, okay, I'll do it. So little by little, more and more successful cases. Here I am today, couple books and 2 or 3 DVDs in. Like I don't even, I just put that out there because I want to help. So at any rate, that's where I come from with Ben. And I am convinced that I'm yet to see a client's dog, be as reactive as he was back then. And he was not a biting dog, but you never would have known that. And he did still inflict injury with our dogs. A couple times, turning his head too fast, caught a dog on the side of the face. There was still injury. It does not take a biting dog to inflict injury, okay? So the first thing I want you to think about is, what is success? For me, success is little tiny pieces of improvement. If you were to tell me that I was going to go from this dog that couldn't even see a dog poster on the wall without aggressing at it, or a TV, right? Back then the big, Chihuahua head came on. The Taco Bell Chihuahua was famous at that point. So we all had to when Ben saw it, he would just start rushing at the TV, so we'd have to grab him. And of course, Greg would always say, I'm going to kill him if he wrecks the TV, right? But because big screens, they were novel back then, right? So we were all excited that we get to have one, get one, right? But so we went from that, and then he'd be my neutral dog with a bunch of dogs that were acting this way. I would never have believed it. So I want to make sure with my clients that we don't just have a little box we're going to keep this in. We're just going to go work on goal after goal after goal after goal, and then you can reach as far as you ever thought you wanted to. I never thought this dog would compete, ever, in his entire life. But he did that, and he did it well. He got a title in a weekend, all ribboned. So it's really, really awesome. Reactive versus aggressive. So now it seems that the in thing to say about aggressive versus reactive. And I'm just giving you information from what I hear in the dog training community. Reactive is okay, aggressive isn't. If you look at a reactive dog and you look at an aggressive dog, I would think you would have a really hard time telling the difference, because these are both labels. And I don't really like to label things, but just to simplify, in my brain, reactive is overstimulation. Dogs that just cannot hold it together. You find a lot of them being in that adolescent period where they're, and it comes from, a couple different places. Some, like my Lizzie Taylor, the first dog that you saw on the screen, she could not, she had no idea why we couldn't play with every dog when we went to dog class. She came in and she was lunging at the end of her leash, but she was like, I want to play. I don't want to do sits. I want to play. I want to play. I want to play. So she was really hard to get under control. And I got to tell you, she was harder than Ben, actually, right? Because she just wanted to play, right? So for me, reactive is overstimulated. They just can't. They're not thinking, right? Especially as adolescents. They don't know what they're doing, right? As opposed to aggressive. If you look up the word aggressive, you would find that you usually find a definition that says something like intent to bite or intent to harm. I will say, after seeing aggressive dogs for a very long time, I don't believe that every dog has an intent to bite when they do. Some do, but I believe that some don't. No more than if somebody scares you when you jump up and almost hit your head on the ceiling or something, and you say, oh, I didn't know. I think dogs do that, because I've seen dogs do that. They get too close to somebody because they're a little nervous about people. The old, here, let me give you a treat. And that's something you really don't want to do if you have dogs that are people sensitive, because the problem with that is they see the really nice treat in the person's hand, and they are like, okay, I really want the treat, but I have to go really close to that person to get it. So they might bark going backwards and like, oh, but I really want the treat. Oh, no, I can't do it. So chances are with these dogs, if they take the treat, they're going to run in the opposite direction. And again, there's always that moment of getting too close, and they can panic. And that's where I think a lot of this sometimes comes from. Or the dog that says, you know what, I really don't like a lot of people around me. I don't really like a lot of dogs around me. So you know what, nobody seems to be making good decisions for me. So you know what, I'm just going to bite them and they all go away. Because they do. They do. They'll go away. Right? Because this is the hard thing. We are human. We are a verbal species, and we know it's okay. But there's no way to say to the dog, it's okay, that person's not going to hurt you, especially when you have fearful dogs that have some traumatic pasts, right? Because we never really know what dogs have went through. And I will always say that I really think that if dogs could talk to us, I think they have a darn good reason for every single behavior that they do. I really do. But the problem with that is if we're exposing and you say, well, you know what, or you get the famous, I'm a dog person. I'm great with dogs. Dogs always love me. If you have a sensitive dog, anytime somebody says that to you, from this day forward, I want you to see a flashing red caution above their head. Because you know what? If they were really dog people, they'd leave your dog alone. And they would let your dog come to you. When I see clients, I never go up to their dogs, ever. And these are aggressive dogs, but I sit in my chair and I talk to the people, and the first thing the dog saunters up a little and says, you're not bugging me. I like that. I think I'm going to sniff you. Good, go right ahead. Go right ahead. I'm not going to pull any fast ones on you. I'm not going to reach for you. I'm not going to stare at you. I'm not going to do any of it. I'm just going to let you come and check me out. And the first thing you know, I have a head in my lap. Or I have a dog sniff in my hand, right? So at any rate, that's why I don't like labeling it, right? Because reactivity, aggression can come from overexcitement. It can come from fear. It can come from frustration. There's just many, many reasons why dogs do what they do, right? So we're going to go through these and talk about this. So I'm just going to throw this up here because I always feel like I should. I've been a veterinary technician for a scary 23 years or some scary number like that. But before treatment, when I treat my clients, I want to make sure that they have had a good medical exam, because again, if you're having a dog that's older, let's say, because I hear this, dogs that are older, never bitten before, had aggressive tendencies before at all, and this is starting to happen, it's a really good idea to get a medical check first. Simply because things like that just don't happen. There's usually a reason behind it. So it's good to get a veterinary exam, do the blood workups, liver, kidney, complete blood count, white blood, red cell, all that good stuff. A thyroid panel, it's really informative to have a complete thyroid panel, not just a T4, right? Because a lot of times when we go to the vet, they just want to say, okay, I'll do a T4. But it's good to get a complete thyroid panel so you can see how everything is, working together. And a urinalysis, they all have, that's all good information. And you know what? You're hoping that everything's normal. Although I got to tell you, with Ben, when I did this, I thought, oh, please let something be wrong. Please. Because I can deal with a medical issue a lot easier than I can deal with a behavioral issue, right? In most cases. So, but get a check. Always look medical first. I always want to say veterinary behaviorist with a question mark. So when I see cases that have, severe aggression to people, dogs, obsessive compulsive problems, severe separation anxiety, dogs that are like flying out windows and destroying rooms in your house because they are just so anxious, I will be sending them to a veterinary behaviorist. Now, it is the person's decision whether they want to go or not. I will tell you it is not cheap, but they do give you your prescription, they give you a training plan, there's a lot of information there, so it's well worth the money. And also, for those of you who may think, well, I don't know that I want my dog on meds. Years ago, we did the acepromazine, the potassium bromide. So when you went to a veterinary behaviorist, you would get medication that would just simply make your dog lethargic, right? But now, they don't, these are medications like we take, where it just helps you work with the dog better, the dog is calmer, so that you can make more of an impact with the training that you do. Dr. Dodman, who I know and really like, and been to several of his talks, I like the way he describes this. He gives me an analogy. Is think of the brain as a strainer with all those holes. And when you put a dog on medication, you will now start to plug up some of those holes. So your serotonin, your dopamine, all of that will stay in the brain longer, which means that the dog can think more when they can concentrate longer, right? So, so that's why it's nice. If you want to go the route of medication, it's very helpful. It is not a be-all, end-all in most cases. I do have clients who say, you know what, I don't want to do medication, and that is totally fine. Because anything will get the dog. We need the dog to get mentally stimulated. We need the dog to get thinking. We need to start to give them more behaviors to help them deal with the issues that they're having. So some points to consider. If you have a dog and you're trying to decide, do I go through with this or not? Well, these are things I want you to think about. Severity of injury, right? That makes a difference, and it makes a difference how big the dog is, right? I have 3 Goldens and a Papillon right now. Papillon gets away with all kinds of crap. Yeah, Papillon, people pat him and he goes, when he makes his little face and all this kind of thing, and people say, oh, isn't he cute? Let one of my Goldens try that. And they'll look at him and say, and you're a behavior person? What? How'd you do that? Because they shouldn't be showing you that kind of behavior. Papillon, though, it's cute, right? But you've got to think about that. What is the reinforcement history of the dog? People tend to call me when the dog's bitten 10 people at the door. Okay, we can change it. We can certainly, behavior we can always change and work with for sure. But how long has it been going on, right? I love it when people contact me and say, you know what, I think we're headed for that. So I really want to get some foundation behaviors on board. I want to get some training going so we don't end up there. I like that. That makes me really happy because you can just, it's just so much easier. Are you capable of it? Do we want to be trainers? Most of us don't want to be trainers. I didn't want to train Ben when I had all that problems to deal with. I had other things that I wanted to train. I wanted to do obedience competition. I didn't want to do all this emotional clicker training stuff. But that's something you have to decide. Do you want to do it? because you're going to have to do it. It's preventative medicine for these dogs, right? Family compliance, is everybody all in? And you know what? I will say it's okay if they're not, as long as everybody's on the same page. I have worked with families who, let's say, I just remember I had a family, it was 5 of them, 3 children and the parents. And the father said, you know what, I don't want to deal with this. I don't think we should have the dog. I don't want to deal with this. And I think one of the other children decided, and that is fine. But the 3 people who wanted to work with the dog ended up doing the management that we're going to talk about, doing the training that we're going to talk about, and the dog greatly improved. So what was really cool about that, I just said to the other 2, you know what, you don't have to be on board, but what I want to make sure that you don't do is sabotage their effort. That's the only thing. You can, you know, if you never want to look at this dog again, that is totally fine, but I want to make sure that you just don't, you know, be in conflict with what they're doing. Are you agreeable to that? Yes, we are. Fine. So, you know, you fast forward about, I don't know, 6, 7 months later, and we keep in touch. And, you know, the wife said to me, you know what I'm really happy about, the dog is getting better. And what's really cool is my husband wanted to train the dog the other night. Because as the behavior gets better, the people who say, yeah, I don't want to do that, now see that the dog is coming along and they now want to be part of it. So that's really awesome. And available resources. Well, it takes time. It takes money, right? It takes compliance with the family. Do you want to have your little family plan, you know, over the dog? Some of us are okay with it. Some of us have other things to do. I get it, right? I get it. But those are things you want to think about before you start, working. Either managing or teaching, your dog is never not learning. I hate that fact. I hate that fact when Lizzie Taylor was a puppy and I brought her to a pet store because I wanted to do some socializing, and some guy, actually it was the guy who worked there, went into a Petco. The guy who worked there said, and he had a golden, and he said, can my dog meet your dog? And I said, yes, of course, she's a puppy. I want her to have as much good social interaction as she can. And then come to find out, you know, they meet for 2 seconds and then his dog just aggresses at her and picks her paw up and smacks her on top of the head. And I pull Lizzie away and I say, what is that about? And the guy says to me, you know what? She's really not been good with puppies lately. I kind of wanted to see what would happen. And I thought, oh no, Lizzie T, no, let's get that out of the brain ASAP, right? But that doesn't, it's an experience. We want to just have the best experiences with our dogs that we can. And it's hard with the puppies because sometimes stuff like that happens, right? So I want you to always be aware that you're always managing or teaching behavior. It used to be taught years ago that you expose them to 100 dogs and 100 people, and you just take a lot of cookies. Now we're finding out, and when I say we, I'm talking about the scientific community, we are finding out that, you know what, it is the quality of those socializations that matter, not the quantity, all right? But you are always managing or teaching. So every time you let your dog go, run into the door to bark at whoever it is, every time that happens, it's becoming a habit. There's a pattern that's being established, right? Because they jump into habits and patterns just like we do, and they love those. Eliminate the rehearsal of the reactive behavior. So again, if you have a dog that is, barking at people on the street, barking at dogs in the, where they are, outside, wherever you live, we all live in different places, you really need to stop the rehearsal of that behavior, because the more they do it, the more they're going to do it. I always say, think about the dog training bank account, right? Every good decision you make with management, every time you train your dog, every really good experience you have with your dog gets put in as deposits in your account. Every time they rehearse that reactivity, you have to take a withdrawal. So if your dog is home while you're at work, let's say, and 80% or 70% of your dog is looking out windows, barking at whatever they see, your dog training account is going to be depleted really fast, right? So I want you to be aware of that. And I have students who say, well, you know what? Nothing I can do about that. I have a client in Boston who has to walk her dog. She does not have a yard, and she sees 30 to 40 dogs a day, and her dog is dog reactive. So I said to her, Audrey, I just want you to know that you can still make progress, but it's going to take you a lot longer than somebody else who can. So ways we can stop the rehearsal, you know, you can get, you can baby gate off certain parts of the house. If you came to my house, you would see that we have a front door with 2 big panes, window panes, right? We didn't have this in the old house, right? This house is bigger and it's got huge windows, which is lovely. I love it. I love the sun to come in, but that also means it's more open for my dogs to react to what's outside, right? So we have one neighbor, they're across the street, and I'll tell you, when we first moved in, they were doing construction on the house. So my dogs thought it was just so much fun to bark at the comers and goers that were, you know, coming and going from his house. So actually, if you go to my house right now, you will find my dogs on my 2nd floor. And the reason for that is because they can't see out, right? There's windows up there, but they're not interested in the wildlife, really. They're not interested. They just hang around upstairs, right? So I'm not going to have them practice that reactivity when I'm not home, right? So it could be something as simple as just rerouting the dog. It could be putting up some baby gates so they can't get access. In my old house, we had a big bay window. So when we were not there, again, they'd either go down to our finished basement or we'd put the big baby gate across so that they couldn't get to the bay window. Because it always amazed me how a 50-pound golden retriever could lay down on a ledge this big and look out at the bicyclists and the people walking their dogs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? You may think of putting some kind of screens on your windows. I will tell you, when I meet with clients, I never ask them to do something I would never do. So a lot of trainers would suggest getting those screens that you can get at like Lowe's or Home Depot. They have some pretty, you know, pretty colors now that you can use. But personally, I wouldn't put those in my house because I want the sun to come in. So we have shutters that are halfway so that, you know, you can block out the pieces that you don't want the dog to see, but yet the sun can come up and in, and they actually look really pretty on your windows, right? So those are just some ideas. But you really have to stop the rehearsal of it. And if there's anything that you take from this workshop today is in the rehearsal, because I will even say that if you only did that, only that, your dog would get better. Maybe not as quickly as you wanted, maybe because you weren't doing anything else, but your dog would definitely get better because that pattern is not rehearsed again and again and again and again. Okay? So that's really important. Regression is a part of the learning process. I have to tell you that because it feels really good when our dogs are doing better because they do get better. But the problem is then you hit a regression point where they did go ahead and bark and lunge at another dog, but that is normal learning. That is how we learn. No behavior is 100%. It'd be great if it was, but there's no such thing, not even with us. These are habits, the patterns of behavior. You need to change the routine, right? So when I have clients who say to me, I walk my dog every day, and I say, okay. I say, well, and that's where they bark and lunge at dogs. And I say, oh, okay, well, we need to stop this. And they say, well, I have to walk my dog every day. And I said, well, do you have a fenced yard? Do you have to walk your dog every day? Yes, I do. And I do have a fenced-in backyard. And I said, then why are we walking every day? And they say, because I'm supposed to walk every day. If you have a dog, you're supposed to walk it every day. I feel guilty if I don't walk it every day. And I say to them, yeah, you know what? I'd feel guilty if I was walking my dog every day, causing my dog anxiety and myself. And what you're doing is repeating that pattern of behavior over and over and over again. So you get, you know, you're digging the hole deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's really hard because, again, society says that we need to do certain things with our dogs, and that's a bunch of crap. It is. Your dog needs to be mentally stimulated and physically stimulated every day. That is absolutely true. But you can play with your dog in the yard. You can walk your dog in the yard. Your dog is happy to be with you. You have a lot of reinforcement power. You have more than you think you do. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. But you need to change the routine because if you were in that very common issue that I deal with, if you walk that dog again and again and again and again and not change anything, I always say don't cross your fingers wishing it away. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You have to really change the routine and you have to think about what you want to do because then it just becomes a pattern, just a pattern. And the thing is, what is the context, right? Because dogs are really good in some contexts and not great in others. I have to tell you with Ben, Although we had to separate him a lot of times during the days when we were home, because of course when we weren't home, they were all, managed. But yet that dog could sleep in bed with us every night. And I thought to myself, wow, this is crazy. Why would I even do this? But I do it because of reinforcement history. All the dogs climb into bed with us at night, and everybody sleeps. And I said, the day that I wake up and he's growling, the day that I wake up, and I will wake up. I can sleep through a thunderstorm, but if I hear one of the dogs going, I'm up. What's wrong with the dog, right? I'm up. So, but I thought, you know what? I'm going to leave everything the same until I have a reason to change it. And I never had to, because the context kept it the same. All those contextual cues kept Ben's behavior fine in that context. So that's the other thing you have to think about. Is the dog biting or growling only when they go to the vet? Right? Well, that's that context. You have to think, is it generalizing out to other contexts? Those are other things you need to think about. But one thing is you need to change your routine, train certain behaviors, and then stay out of the formally challenging ones until your behavior that you have is reliable at this point, right? And one of the things with the click-to-calm methodology for dogs especially who have, dogs that are walked every day, because my clients will say to me, I can walk them in this part of the street and I can walk them on that part of the street. But when I walk by, and it's so funny, it's always the same example. We walk by that house that has an invisible fence and the dog comes running out as a barks at the boundary, that my dog really gets upset. So of course my first thing is, well, you know what, you can't walk there until your other behaviors are reliable. All right? And behavior that is never practiced will eventually extinguish. I will tell you that when I had been years ago, I worked through all of this with him in different stages, and he never became that vomiting, salivating dog in the future. When a dog would come up to him, he wasn't friendly. He would just be like, get away from me, right? But that was it. So I don't know that Ben would ever be totally comfortable with dogs, although in his lifetime he did meet dogs. But behavior that is not practiced, it will eventually extinguish. However, you're always going to be managing. And you know what? In all honesty, I have normal dogs and I manage them just as well. Because you'll be amazed how fast you can have a dog who gets along with other dogs, let's say, or people, and have some kind of traumatic event, and how quickly they decide, you know what? Dogs are not for me. Strangers are not for me. So I'm going to think differently about this now. So even if you have normal dogs, you have to protect them. So let's look through some effective home management. So the way I work with this today, to give you as much information as I can, I'm pretending you're all my client, right? So when I see my clients, first thing I talk about is non-rehearsal, like we just did. And then I talk about, okay, what's it like at home? I want to make sure that everything at home is happening the way it should, because if you're not getting behavior at home, don't even think or kid yourself that you're going to get it out there. The minute you step out that door, your distraction level goes from this to this, and you need to be relevant in those environments. And if you're not getting it at home with that lower distraction level, you're not going to get it outside. You're not. And this is learning theory. This is not me. This is learning theory, right? First thing is I say, teach the dog to say please. Please equals a sit. Make it easy, right? You want to go out to pee? Where's your sit? Oh, good. The sit made the door open. You want to go in the car? Where's your sit? Oh, there's a sit. Go right in. You want to have your meal, which a lot of my clients do. You want, well, sit. Okay, I'm going to put it down. Okay, now you can go get your meal. But how many times when your dog says, come on and pat me because I'm so cute and wonderful and lovable, how many times do you say, well, where's your sit? We don't, because they're so cute and lovable. So we all end up, loving them up. Which is fine. We want to love them up. But again, that's really powerful reinforcement that you're ready to give away. With my guys, as puppies, I'd say, well, where's your sit? And of course, they look at me and I help them. And they sit and I say, excellent. So then I pick them up, right? So it's important to teach your dog to say please. Otherwise, dogs just do what they do what they do, and you know what? You don't notice it until it becomes a problem. Because that's what we tend to do with each other. So we do it with the dogs, too. So I like it when they learn to say please. The other thing that you're building is a really, really strong default, which is really important. You should always have a really strong behavior, even if it's one behavior you teach your dog. One behavior that they will sit no matter what. You know, I could tell you stories of how, you know, people have dogs that are not good with people in the doorways. And, you know, I remember this one case where the woman's children ordered pizza, didn't tell her, and all she knows is she sees the pizza guy at the door and the dog just running, because it was a French door, running to go grab the guy with the pizza. And she said, all I did was go, sit! She screamed out, sit, and the dog literally went, what? And she went, you know, and got the dog, right? But again, a really, really strong behavior. If you only don't want to do much training, just get a really, really, really strong default. And actually, that's going to work a lot. Just will be used in a lot of different situations. Feed them out of puzzle toys. My dogs do not eat out of a bowl until they're at least 3 years old. And the reason for that is because they like to figure things out, right? The Kongs, stuff the Kongs, you know, we have these flying saucers that you put the food in and crank it down and they can learn to get in there. I would even say that dogs need to be mentally stimulated more than they need to be physically stimulated. I'll even go that far to say that. Yes, they need to be physically stimulated. They need exercise, of course they do. But you can exercise a dog, you know, you can take them running 10 miles every day. But yet, if they are a dog that's a working dog, if they're a dog that they're smart dogs, you don't want smart dogs. I'm just telling you. When friends say to me, I really want an intelligent dog, I say, oh, no, you don't. No, you don't. You want a dog that's trainable. You want a dog that says, you said sit? Oh, yeah, I'll sit. There we go. Yeah. Oh, I'm barking at a dog? Oh, no, don't do that. Oh, okay, I won't do that. That's what you want, right? It is your intelligent, really smart dogs who are really sensitive dogs, and they come in every breed and every mix of breed. That's where your difficulty lies. And feeding them out of puzzle toys gets their brains working. Every time they're working on a puzzle toy, they're opening up more and more neural pathways in their brain that's going to make them stronger, more variable, and more confident. And that is what you want. Lower protein food, I have a question mark. And the reason for that is there was a study done probably now, I don't know, 15 years ago, where if you had a high protein percentage of food, they range now, whatever dog food you're feeding, right? They range from something like, I don't know, 16%, although Dr. Dodman, I remember that from one of his talks. I've yet to find one at 16%, but you can find some at 22, 24, 25, but they range up to like 45% protein. You want to stick on the lower end of protein, and the reason is that they did a study years ago, but they only did it once, and that's why a lot of people don't really use it as a reference these days, because it was not repeated. But when they did the study, they found that dogs on higher protein food do not have as much serotonin and dopamine levels as dogs that are on a lower protein. So I think, as I understand it, it goes back to the whole trying to keep as much dopamine and those calming chemicals in the brain as much as you can. And yeah, keeping them as much as you can versus having it drain out as faster. I'm not a neuroscientist in any way, but I believe that is how I interpret it. And I will tell you, in the dog training community, there are tons of anecdotal commentaries on this being the case. So if you want to look that up, I'm sure you can reference it. I mean, I have not yet looked at the URL for it, but if you want it, I'm sure I can find it for you. But the only point I want to make about that is, you know what? It might be something worth trying that really doesn't take a lot of effort. And if you're feeding a certain brand that you like, if you look in the line, you can always find one that is lower protein in that line usually. right? So again, just throwing that out there, just from some food for thought. Reinforce calm behavior only. As humans, we tend to reinforce things that we don't want. You know, we look at the dog when they're eating the shoe. We look at the dog when they're not coming when they're called. We're looking at the dog when they're, I don't know, jumping on us, or and they're going, get out, whatever you're saying. The problem with that is that you're reinforcing that behavior every time, especially the dogs that are barking. Shut up, hey, stop doing that, you know, et cetera, et cetera. The dog says, oh, good, you're barking too. This is great. You must like this. You're adding in. Excellent. Nobody likes being ignored, right? I've done a little bit of studying of human behavior with this, and it's really sad to me, but it is the truth, that you can have teenagers who don't feel like they get enough of their parents' attention, and some of them will go out and do things to get attention, and then when you ask them why they did it, they will say, because I wanted some attention. Because you know what? Bad attention is better than none, right? So, your dogs love you. They love you when you are being nice to them, and they really even don't mind the yelling at them, or the no, don't do that, whatever, and they're just thinking, yep, you're giving me eye contact, you're giving me attention, and I love all that attention, right? I tell you, I come from a mother who used to ignore me when I was a kid. And she knew nothing about this. But I will tell you, when I did something wrong when I was, yay high, she would just look at me and say, I can't believe you did that. She'd turn and walk away and ignore me for like 24 hours. Now, she'd feed me, and she'd talk to me when she had to, but I can remember running after her saying, just talk to me, yell at me, do something. And she'd just look at me and go, and walk. And I'd go, oh, it was so painful. So I want you to think about what you're reinforcing. I want you to think about when the dog is nice and calm. That is when you want the dog to play a game with you. It's not because the dog has tennis balls all over the house and they keep bringing them to you and you say, oh my gosh, will this ever stop? Because you know it won't, because you're reinforcing it. Or the dog with the tennis ball goes under the couch and says, I need it again, please. And you say, ugh. So you go, you get it out. Stop this now, don't do this again. And of course, what do? 5 minutes later? It's a great game that they've taught you to play, right? So again, I want you to think about, okay, I want to play with my dog. I know, I've been working all day, I feel bad. My dog hasn't had that much mental stimulation today. So I'm going to wait till my dog is quiet, and then I'm going to go and say, you want to play tennis ball? Look, I'm going to go get it. And the dog's like, oh, we're playing tennis ball. Oh my God, yeah, I want to do it, right? So they're all excited. And again, you have all that reinforcement power, right? So I want you to know it and be conscious of it. And you're going to play by the rules. You're not going to play because your dog has asked you for the 50 millionth time to play, now tears a hole in your shirt. This is my American Eskimo did years ago. And then I got mad. Otherwise, I'd be like, okay, I'm coming. Okay, I'm coming. Okay, I'm coming. Your interactive toys, your tennis balls, your frisbees, your tug toys, up in a closet, in a drawer. In my house, you will find all of the tennis balls in a Rubbermaid bin. And they only play with them when we go out into our backyard to play. And they love it. We'll look at them and say, okay, do you want to go out? And they know that is the cue. They line up at the door. I open the door. They run outside, and they'll turn and stare at us. And I say, okay, Caden, here's yours. Lizzie, here's yours. They love this. They live for this, right? So then you play, but you get behavior before you play. The sit, for my guys, it is the waiting at the door. They're not jumping on it. They're not clawing it. They're just waiting in stands at the door, and then I release them to go, and then they turn around and stand and wait for their tennis ball to be thrown. You play as much as you know they want to play. You don't, play it to 10 repetitions until on the, 12th, they say, thanks for the ball, and they go and hide under the bush. You play it. It's a cooperative game. Stop with them wanting more. And when we're done, right, I take the tennis ball and I show it to my dogs, and I say, you know what, here it is. It's going back in the bin. So now you don't have a dog that's running around looking where the ball went, right? So it's important to do that. If you're playing tug, I don't mind tug. But again, there you have to have it under stimulus control. Where's your sit? Lizzie sits. I get the tug toy, get it. She latches onto the middle of it, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I want it to be a cooperative game. I'm not going to let her take one end and just go shaking it all over the place, right? Because then she's just learning to kill things. She knows how to kill things. Believe me, I found the little frog in her mouth that she thought was chewing gum, right? I know, gross. But I want to play this cooperative game, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then when she is, we're ready to be done, I say, out. And she drops it and comes back into a sit. I can take it and put it away. And the easiest way to teach this is basically back and forth, back and forth. I had a piece of cheese in my mouth. Yes, gross, I know. But I had a piece of cheese in my mouth, and I said, out. I spit a piece of cheese in her nose. And she went, did you just spit a piece of cheese at my nose? And I said, that is exactly what I did. So, of course, I just freeze, and she's like, okay, let me check it out. Yes, it is a piece of cheese. And then I say, yep, look, I've got the tug as she's chewing, and look, I'm putting it away. 3 times I did that. 3 times. And now she's just like, yep, I know. Hands off, mouth off. So easy to teach, and again, reinforces what you want. Exercise both mind and body. Every dog, I believe, should have a safe space, especially for your dogs that are not good with strangers. I have clients who come to me and say, you know what, I have not had a visitor in my house in 3 years. And the first thing I'm going to do with that client is say, you know what, you need to have visitors. Because I don't want you resenting the dog later that you don't have people to the house. So we established a safe space. If you came into my house, you would find that we have a basement, and we bought these Florida ceiling kennels. And that's where they go in when, people come that are not dog fans, right? They all go down there. And what's interesting about this is they go down there to eat their meals, usually about 3 times a day. They go in, they have their ones that they all go into, they know which one is theirs, put them in, shut the kennel doors, I go up, I do something, I come back down, let them all out. The difference is this: when we have people that visit, I do exactly the same thing. I get their meals ready. Down there, they go down with their meals in like an elk antler or something like this, right? Because they have certain toys, mentally stimulating toys that I use in different occasions. The only difference is I put them all in, I put the radio on. The minute I put the radio on, they know that they're not coming back up for a while. So it's really interesting to see. Because if it's just a normal meal day, they just stand there and wait for the kennel door to be opened. But when I put the radio on, they all go into their beds because they know that is a cue to tell them that, you know what, you're going to be down there for a while. And they're fine with that, right? So we want to establish a safe space. It can be anything. It can be a crate. It can be a baby-gated room. It can be a laundry room. It could be a mud room. It can be anything. But the biggest piece of that, if you have dogs that are not great with strangers, is to make sure that they're not in the vicinity of the strangers, because then you just can get some barrier frustration, right? So if you're going to do that, have them up where they can't see. Put the TV on, put the radio on, put some kind of noise that you may have on, when you're going to, when you're normally home, so they find that comforting. And you have to teach that, right? Little bit over time. Practice object exchanges, that's just preventative. When I have young dogs, you have my shoe, great. Give me the shoe and I'll give you a treat. Now go lay down or whatever. If you find that they keep rounding things up and bringing you things, it simply means they're not mentally stimulated enough. So you have to find something else in the day that you can help them do that. And again, rotate the toys. I know we love to have, the big toy box with 20 million toys in it. It's always best to round them up, put them away, give the dog maybe 3-4 new toys a day that they can hang out with. And then at the end of the day, pick them up, put them back, and then take out new ones. Dogs are like children. You can have these toys out all the time, and there's certain toys that they like and certain toys that they don't really care for. But you watch, if another dog came in and said, oh, I like this toy, they'll say, hands off, that's mine. Even though the dog hasn't looked at it in 5 years, right? Because that's what they do, right? And toys are expensive. You don't want to keep buying new toys all the time, right? So you can rotate the toys. Interactive toys, it's a great thing to have them put away, right? Your tug toys, your tennis balls, those are Huge reinforcements. Do not give that power away. You know, have your dog do the sit for it, play with them, nice quality time, because that just builds a relationship with your dog, and it's awesome. And then just show them where you're putting it, right? And then your mentally stimulating toys are things that we talked about, your food toys, your Kongs, your, you know, my guys don't get elk antlers because they're crazy expensive, but I have a stash of them, just in case if I need to have them quiet for a while, right? I put them in with that, and they're like, oh, you love these. We haven't seen these in a while. That's right. You get to play with those for the next 2 hours. Good for you. And they love that, right? So make sure you think about those toys and how you can use them to mentally stimulate the dog more. So let's look at some foundation behaviors. I'm just going to go through some of these. And again, when I see clients, I don't say, I need you to have all these millions of foundation behaviors, right? Because we just don't have the time. I give them things that I know is going to work for them in their household. So let me just show you some ways of teaching some of these things. The default sit, the way I like to teach this is I like to throw a cookie, have the dog sit, throw a cookie, have the dog sit. The reason is this. If you go into an obedience class, they'll have you sit the dog, sit. And then you tend to work on a stay, although a sit and a stay are two different behaviors, right? And you work on them separately. But they have them sit. So then they say, okay, I'm going to move over here, and everything's quiet. And you're watching them. Okay. The sad part about that is, and that's great, because you've got to start somewhere. The hard part about that is don't expect that sit to hold up as a sit in the doorway, or a sit when somebody's trying to pet them. Because that sit is not that sit, right? So the way I like to do it is I like them to get the sit, click, we'll talk about clicker training in just a sec, but sit, I click, the behavior I want, I toss a cookie. So the dog is always going from activity to a sit, activity to a sit, activity to a sit. Because if you look at the context that you're going to want in your real life, you're going to go from activity to a sit, activity to a sit, activity to a sit. Right? So I want to try to cut all the corners I can, because I know we don't have time to train all the time. I get it. But let me just show you a little video of this. This is one of my students in reactive dog class. Okay, easy. Toss a cookie, sit. Toss a cookie, sit. Let me show you, this is another one that I like, is a backup sit, which I'll explain this before I show it to you. So if you think about when you're walking your reactive dog, right? Let's say you're walking on the street, and we all know this too well, right? You're walking, your dog sees a dog, let's say, or something else that excites them. And then you say, uh-oh, like your brain says, uh-oh, right? And as you're walking, the dog also now looks, and then the dog focuses, and how hard is it to take that dog away, right? So this is you, right? Come on, or whatever you're saying, right? And I swear the little dogs even blow up to 3 times their size, and they're really hard to move, right? So what I like about this exercise, I call it the backup sit. When I was teaching Ben a front years ago, I would have cookies in my hands and I would just go like this, right? Because again, if you know anything about obedience competition, one of the exercises is they have to, you call them from across the room, front, and they come running and they sit right in front of you. And the sit has to be nice and straight or you get points off, right? It's a very precise sport. And so teaching Ben, I did a lot of this. Right? Coming in. So how nice did you think it was when I started, and I didn't do this on purpose. I mean, I wouldn't make the connection at that point in time, but I'd be walking Ben, and then I'd see something, my brain would go, uh-oh. And I started walking backwards, and what do you think I got? Sit in front. And I went, oh, that's good. That's so much easier than having to drag them away, right? So I started putting this into my curriculum. So I'm going to show you what it looks like done as a whole piece, and then I'm going to show you the piece that's the hardest part of all. So this is Caden. Let me tell you quickly about Caden. Caden is about 11 years old now. He was a wicked little dog when he was little. He was a puppy that was pulled off the streets of Newton. He was left in a collapsible crate. And the girls at work, right? I was working at the veterinary clinic in Newton, and they said, well, Lizzie Taylor needs a new brother. And I said, no, Lizzie Taylor needs nothing, because I have a nice, peaceful household right now. This was after Ben passed. And they get along great, so I was very happy about this. So then, of course, my husband says, well, we always have room for a rescue. I said, well, we do, but not right now, because I'm enjoying my life right now with peace. But so in comes Caden. This big, you know, I don't know, 8 or 9 weeks old, right? Little Caden, little perfect Caden, who was a mess. But behaviorally, he seemed perfect. So in he comes, and the first day he is home, he tries to attack the Papillon. First night, he goes after the Papillon. And I'm like, again, why? Then in that week, he was possessive aggressive, food aggressive, horrible with dogs, you know. So I thought, oh, good heavens, right? But now, so that's his story. He is... Everything I'm teaching you, obviously I did with him. As far as the dog reactivity goes, he has been competing in agility with like 100 dogs in one environment, and he actually just got his master's standard title, which is very exciting. So I actually use him a lot because he did all this, right, when he was younger. So let me just show you what that looks like. I toss a cookie and I back up. Caden. Okay, so I toss a cookie, he backs up. He comes into a front. I honestly do not care about the front, but I just care that they come in, right? I just want them to come into the body. I don't care if they stand, I don't care if they sit, I don't care what they do. I just want them to come in to the person's body in straight. Not here, not there, but right in. Because if they're here and there's dogs behind you, then they can go out the other way. I like them nice and straight coming in. So let me just show you a close-up of what that looks like. So basically what it is cookies in both hands, and I'm just going really slow, backing up. And the biggest thing is elbows are attached to the body. You don't feed them out here. That's a lot of space if you have a reactive dog for a problem to happen. You want them, like, I want them in my bubble, right? Some dogs are not comfortable with that. You have to work with that. Dogs go where they're fed. Dogs go where the primary reinforcement is given. So if you feed them here all the time, they're going to be there. When you try to bring them in, they're going to say, well, there's a lot of pressure in here, right? So with my guys, elbow attached to the body, they have to come in to get the treat. All right, so let me just show you what that looks like.
All right.
So I'm going to toss the cookie and I'm going to back up. Just keep the nose on my hand as I'm backing up. All right? So that's what that looks like. I'm going to do it up slow. So I'm coming in. He's going to attach his nose to my hand. I'm going to back up really slow so that he's always this much space away. All right? So it's very important in teaching this behavior. Very important. And again, I'm going to have him come in nice and close to get the cookies. Okay, hand target, easy. Easy, wonderful behavior. One of the first behaviors I teach my dogs. Just put your hand out. Dogs usually sniff your hand. When they come and sniff your hand, you can click and give them a treat. It's super easy. It works really. Hand targets are nice. You can use them as recall. Dog's way over there. Ben, touch. They come running to touch the hand. My Papillon, that's my favorite, the favorite recall cue of my Papillon. You can, if dogs are nervous to meet people, but they're not, they're not biters, but they're kind of a little shy, you can teach them a hand target and then, call them, go to daddy, put your hand out, touch, get a cookie for that, and then you can use it as a greeting cue, right? Go say hi, and because what do people do when they meet dogs? This is what they do all the time. They bend down, They look at the dog and they either make a squeaky voice, hi sweetie, right? And the hand comes out in a different way. The hand is either out because they've learned that palm out helps the dog smell better. Some of them do this, some of them do this, depending on what resources they have in their life. But they'll always come out with something. But this is a universal way to greet, right? And if your dog says, oh, I know what to do with that hand, touch, and then they come back to you, well, now you've just opened the door for that dog to start being a little more social, right? And I like them bouncing back to you so you can stop that interaction at any time. So it's very, very nice. The kennel up on an audible cue, just a couple words about that. If you came to my house and the doorbell would ring, all my 4 dogs go into the mudroom. They're not at the door greeting anybody. They've learned that, I've taught them that when the doorbell rings, all of them, they'll maybe spend a couple seconds going, is somebody really at the door? Yes, they are. And then they run to the mudroom. They wait at the door, I open it, they all go in, I shut the door, I go, get my package or whatever the deal is, and then I come and give them all cookies. Good job, right? So you can teach that really easily. All I did, a couple times a day, well, a couple times, 3 times in a row, what I did is they're all sitting and everybody's quiet, we're watching TV, and I jump up and I say, emergency puppies come. I don't even know why I said that. But I meant to say emergency, but I say emergency puppies come, and they're like, what is she doing? What is she doing? I say, hurry, come on. And I run into the mudroom. I'm like, come on, quick. And they're like, okay, we're coming. We don't know what you're doing because we think you're crazy right now, but all right, we're coming. Usually this means something good for us. So, of course, so in they go. I shut the door. I give them like tons of treats that they never get. And they're like, whoa, wow, that was great. So then I let them out and can we do that again? No, we can't. So I just go back to what I was doing. And so eventually they settle. Day 2, I'm at the computer on the island in the kitchen. Emergency puppies come. They jump up and they're like, oh, I think that she's doing the same thing as yesterday. So of course they're much quicker this time going into the mudroom. I shut the door, cookies. Great. Out again. And now they're like, okay, she didn't do anything yesterday, so I guess we'll just hang out now. Day number 3, emergency puppies come, I follow them into the mudroom. Right? We know the mudroom. We get like those great pieces of liver in the mudroom. Yes, we do. Good boys, good girl. Right? So what I did to make the doorbell piece is, I think we might have done one planned one, but the doorbell went off. I'd go around the back of the house so they didn't know that Daddy was out there. But the doorbell rung and I said, emergency puppies come. And they were like, oh, torn now. Either bark there, no, but that liver was really good. So you know what? Okay, let's go to the mudroom. Right? So again, the mudroom, I shut the door, cookies. So again, I get, another week or so, I get a package and, doorbell, they're all in the mudroom. Easy. I just changed the cue. New cue, back by the old. New cue is the doorbell. The old cue is the verbal emergency puppies come. Put them together and just makes life easy. I'm not going to go all the way downstairs for them to go to the kennels, right? Like somebody's coming over, because I just need a quick fix. I don't care if they're barking while I open the door. I just don't want them in the door and have somebody get hit by a car and run out the front door, right? So, get behind. Nice little behavior if you have a sensitive dog. It's one of my students.
Oh, look at the Larry. Can I say hi?
I'm being like Joe Q, pet person.
Okay, that's good. This is good for me because I thought so thanks for helping. Okay.
So, her dog is behind.
You're very cute. Wow, she's adorable.
Hand target. Right? So she uses herself as a barrier. Her dog is shy with dogs and people. She's been with me for a while. But we have this foundation behavior that works well because they'll be in the trails in the woods And this is how she keeps her dog safe while the other people get their dog. Now I get a little kiss, okay. Because again, I'm not overbearing, right? The dog feels comfortable with me because I'm not really doing anything that the dog doesn't understand. And this is a nice little video of a friend of mine who is working on the dog approaching other dogs. So you'll see how that backup sit works here, which is just really easy and nice. Right, and then the dog comes right in. So again, there's no pulling the dog away from the other dog. There's none of this. She's done a fair amount of that, so the dog says, oh, wait a minute. Okay, I'll make the decision to come into you, which is great. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these others, but I just wanted to give you an idea of how you can mix some things up. I will tell you, it's a really wonderful behavior if you can teach your dog to heel with you with their head up. Right, so in my competition world, I love dogs head up, pretty prancing, right? My dogs will do that. But that's not what I normally ask them to do. My regular heeling is basically walk with me, just don't pull me on a leash, and just keep checking in with me. I just want you to keep checking in. So I'm comfortable with that. Emergency recall, pick one word. Feed that word every day. For Ben, it was look. One thing I knew is, because this is years ago, but my mom used to live with us. And I will tell you, 10 o'clock every morning, she would go into the refrigerator and she would pull out a blueberry muffin. And the dogs knew it. Those dogs could be in the yard chasing squirrels. And one would say, hey, I heard the refrigerator door open. And that, because you could see them out there. It was hysterical. You know, you see them. She opens the door. They're all like this. And then she pulls out. She can hear that little noise, right, with the wrapper, right? And then you see them all. Oh, she's doing it. So of course they all run. You see all their faces at the porch door. And she'd put it down. She'd come get them all in. Come on, let's have a muffin. She'd sit down. She has the coffee on the trash can. She has the, because it had a flat surface, right? Her rocking chair was there. And she would take out her muffin and she would feed all these dogs. And my Papillon grew to 12 pounds. Heaviest my Papillon ever was, because he ate too many blueberry muffins. But I thought, I need that recall. And I'm not walking around with wrappers. Right? So I took a word, I used look, and I just carried food with me, and I would just come up to Ben haphazardly during the day, look, and give him a piece of, you know, he loved liver, freeze-dried liver, so I gave him that, and I never use it in my training. And so again, he'd be like, whoa, and I continue through the day. And lucky, if I forgot to do it, I'm emptying my pockets, and there's, 8 pieces of liver, lucky him, jackpot. Liver, look. So do that, feed the word. You never use it unless you really need to use it. I tested it in the house. I'm on one floor, he's on the other. Look, well, down he comes. Outside, chasing squirrels, having a good time. Look, up, leaves it and comes. I used it twice in his lifetime. Once when I was at my obedience class, I'm writing my check to my coach. I look up, he's heading for the air deal in the next ring. Look, I scream it, I'm shaking, turns around, comes back. Second time we're visiting his breeder in the Adirondacks, and they have a big bonfire going, the biggest bonfire I've ever seen in my entire life. Obviously, it was the biggest bonfire he also saw, because he starts running to the bonfire. Greg says, say the word, and I felt like saying, you say the word, you say the word. But I said, look, I scream it, turns around, comes back. It's only 2 times I used it in his life. It's only for emergencies. It's not a regular recall. Right? And why don't you use a regular recall? Because a lot of times we ruin it. Right? Because we, come. Okay, good, you decided to come. Maybe you reinforce that, right? But when you need one shot, one time only, because your dog is gonna be, one of my students, her little pug ran out, tractor was backing up. Her word was treat. Dog turned around and came right back. It's a one-time only thing. Recall with a backup, it'll back up with the down. I'm just going to show you a couple little more complex behaviors. This is a student of mine. Oh, where did she go? She's coming. Okay, there we go. This is Anne. She has a dog that did a lot of biting, right? And I don't believe Sophie, her dog's name is Sophie, I don't believe Sophie bites because she's, you know, a terribly vicious dog. But she is a dog that's very excited. The problem is that when she is excited, she bites. And she has no bite inhibition, so she bites. So Anne has had many bites, right? But now the biting is much better. But one of the reasons I worked on this foundation, this is the first foundation behavior I worked with her on. Because what would happen is the dog would get overexcited. The dog would come running to her and bite. So I said, you know what, Anne, we're going to work on your recall, but instead of the dog coming to you, we're going to teach the dog to back up away from you. So she can call the dog, and then the dog backs up. So I'm just going to show you this because it's really, really a wonderful behavior, and she's done a good job with it. So dog runs to her, backs up.
That was great, Anne.
Right? So that's how that biting stopped. Okay? Very exciting. It's very cool. So I wanted to show it to you. Very cool. And then you can do something like this. So Caden, who was a possessive-aggressive dog, one of his most default behaviors was backing up. So, and then I put a down stay on it. So let me just give you the context. So when he was younger, you know, he would look for things, right? He would look for things, and he would just decide that today, he's been looking at this forever, but today this is going to be the thing I'm going to kill you over. This. And so he'd take it, and he'd hide it, and he would get up on the couch or some kind of item, and he'd just look at you. And I said to my husband, I said, you know what? When you see that, don't go near him, because he will bite, he will go after you. Right? And you never knew. And sometimes he has a twig this big, and I'm like, what does he have? I can't even see. And he's got this tiny little twig that he brought in from outside. But so seeing that, my foundation behavior with Caden was one of backing up. So if he started to go, because you could tell, he'd be normal, and then he'd have this look like, right? This is what he would do. And then when he'd start that business, I'd say, back up, and he would, he'd look at me, and I said, back up, and lie down, stay. And I'm like, what the heck was he going to get? So I take it and I put it away. And I say, what a good boy, right? So this is that behavior. We also use this in our freestyle routine. Right, so then you just add duration to the stay on the down. Right? So that's a little taste of that. We actually have this nice on, in my freestyle routine. We'll be in the center of the room, and I will say back, and we both go back to, we both pull apart, which is really kind of fun. I just transferred that cue. So we're going to fly through this clicker training stuff. So I'm going to give you a definition for those of you who are not familiar with clicker training. It's a positive reinforcement training system based on the principles of operant conditioning that incorporates the use of a marker signal. In this case, we're using a click. If you would go to, Sea Life Park, they use whistles for their dolphins, right? But it's the same type of training to tell the animal precisely what it is doing at that point in time. So there's no magic to the click. It's just we like the clicker because it's easy to carry, it's easy to click, right? You can use a verbal marker if you want. The problem with a verbal marker is that it's slow. It's really slow. So if you have a dog that's going to go and, let's say, bark at another dog, and you say, yes, by the time it takes you to say yes, the dog could have already started barking, versus having that little sound that kind of hits them in their amygdala, and they say, oh, okay, I'm going to get a cookie. So there's that little, interrupter sound that also works to your benefit. So it's for new behavior only. You're not always carrying a clicker forever, but it's convenient to carry. Sometimes we want behavior to increase, and sometimes we want it to decrease. When we're dealing with reactivity, we want it to decrease. It means the same thing all the time, no matter who's holding the clicker and no matter how you feel. When I would go out with Ben, my hand would be shaking. I would be all like, oh. And, but every time he heard the click, he said, Mommy has it together. Dopamine release. We know from science, after the click, before the food, dopamine's released, so that helps, again, calm the brain. And acoustically, it can act as an interrupter. It always conveys confidence, and it's empowering to the dog, right? This is what this is all about. It's not about us trying to demand their attention. It's not about us trying to body block all the other dogs or people. It is about us teaching the dog that, you know what? This is what I'm going to teach you, and you're going to voluntarily give me this behavior if you choose to do so. And that's why it is so empowering to the animal. If Ben was here, and he would probably just be in a default, right down, that's usually what my guys do, and a person walked in there with a dog, he would look at the dog, he would come over here, and he'd sit up, and he'd look at me, and I'd say, oh, there must be a dog in here. Yep, there it is. Because he'd be telling me that there is a dog here. I wouldn't have to go, oh, there's a dog here. Ben, come here. Oh, quickly, get here. Right? I wouldn't have to do that. And everyone who clicks is cool. That's what I like about using it in the shelter. Because dogs don't know people. And again, people trying to do things, sometimes that body language is hard for them. But again, if they hear the common denominator is the click, they say, oh, you're part of the clicker club. Okay, I know what that means. That's really cool. Right? And the learning is permanent, which is nice. So I'm just going to quickly explain how one uses it if you're not familiar. Eventually you'll switch to a verbal marker when you have behavior that you want, and then you'll variably reinforce it. Click when you see the desired behavior. Oh, you're only clicking once. I always tease my students and I say if you click like more than once, my head's going to blow off. But this is a clicker. There's many types of clickers. This is a box clicker. I like this one more. If you have a dog that's sound sensitive, that doesn't like any click, don't use it. Use a verbal marker. There are some with a little push button that the click is a little bit lighter sounding. That also can work nicely. But this, it's pretty loud, right? Especially, I like using this one when you're outdoors. So pretend you're taking a snapshot of the behavior. You get the sit, the butt goes on the floor, click. This click is always a promise. It's a promise that a reinforcement is coming. Food is just easy to use. It's just easy to use because you can take your food and you can decide, when I'm working in the house, I don't need something big, right? I can use your dog's food or Cheerios or something kind of boring, right? But when you're out there in competition with the squirrels, I'm using some good stuff. I'm using cheese, I'm using, some meat of some kind. I'm using something that I probably never want to handle. But that's what it means. You don't click, and you always click and reinforce because that is how the clicker becomes strong, and it stays strong doing that. So here's just some reinforcers I'm going to put up here just for your info. Food is easy because you can carry it. I don't use any fancy pouches when I train with this kind of thing. I just go to Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever, get a nail apron, throw the gross stuff in. I say that because I'm a neatnik, right? So I don't like things on my fingers and all this kind of stuff. But I need something the dog's going to work for. The dog decides what they're going to work for. If I have to use touch, because some dogs are not eating, I'll use tactile, nice calm interaction. Not this, right? Just nice calm. Like before my dog and my Austin, goes in for an agility run, he stretches, and I give him this nice massage, and everything's great. Praise has to be different, right? If you're always talking to your dog, oh, what a good boy, right? Austin has a good agility run. What a good boy, that was awesome, that was so good, I'm so proud of you, excellent. Like he never gets that kind of praise, right? So if you're going to use something like that, although in the beginning I don't think it's powerful enough, but you want it to mean something. Toys are great, but you have to keep them on stimulus control. One of the best reinforcers for Ben was a tennis ball on a rope. right? He'll take that any day over food, any day. But I have to make sure that if I give it to him, I'm going to tug with him a little bit. Out, he's going to release it. I don't want him to then be hanging on it, and then because then you can get into some some behavior that's not going to be good. Release of pressure. You know, one of the things with Ben, he didn't like to walk in certain places, so we walk in, I click, we walk back out. And that worked perfectly as a reinforcer. Behavior that the animal finds aversive is stopped. I'm going to, I don't know, teach my dogs to handle nail clipping. So I'm going to, you know, give the paw, I'm going to give, I might get one nail, I'm going to click, and then I let the dog go. Because that's all I want is that one. And so we're going to stop that behavior. If you let me do this once, I'm going to stop that behavior. And then you're going to find that the animal will let you do it more and more and more. You want to vary the reinforcers. Things that matter, timing, right? Timing of the click, although we're all students of that. High rate of reinforcement, you're going to have to pay more. Think of the food or the reinforcement as your currency. You have to pay more for harder situations than others. And you have to set appropriate criteria. You're always working on one piece of criterion at a time, right? Just like you don't teach a sit and a stay at the same time. You teach a dog to sit, you get the sit reliable, then you tack on a stay. Same thing with this, one piece at a time, or else you will fail. We all do, because that is learning theory. Distance, duration, distraction, generalizing, proofing, all that comes into one piece of criteria at a time, okay? 3 ways to get the behavior with the clicker. Well, you can capture things. When my Kazan was doing freestyle, I wanted him to bow to the judges. So I tried to do all this kind of fancy stuff with clicking for his head down and all this, nothing ever worked. I did know that when he got out of bed in the morning, what did he do? Stretched. So I had my clicker by the bedstand, and every time he did this, I clicked and gave him whatever was laying around, right, for food or reinforcement, right? So then I just transferred the verbal, because I'd say bow, and he'd bow. So then I transferred the verbal to this, and say the word, and he would do that. So it was easy. Shaping, I wanted to show you a couple videos of how you can shape it with, this is Austin, who was afraid of the vacuum cleaner. Show you a little bit of this. There's the monster sitting on the floor. Right now he's not touching it, but he's getting a little closer to it, so I'll take that. I'm turning his head away to release the pressure that the vacuum is happening, right? Is that the vacuum is giving off. All right, so he can decide when he wants to touch it.
Go touch.
Right, so that's a little bit of that. And do you see, so if I was going to do this one over, did you happen to see every time I clicked there was a little bit of startle? Did you see that? Notice that in his body? It was a little tight. So had I had a button clicker, I would have used that because it would the sound would have been a little bit more muted. Because that's the beauty of it when you're dealing with reactivity, right? Because they can be thinking about reacting and then you click and they're like, oh yeah, that's right, I'm going to do this instead. And it worked for him because, you know, he's used to the clicker. But because the vacuum was there, he was like, ooh, you know. But in that case, if I did that over, I'd use a button clicker in that case. I just wanted to point that out. So this is Lizzie Taylor, who we're exploring. I'm going to run this just for a couple seconds. So I put the bucket on the floor, and she gets to experiment with it. She's not afraid of it. She's just going to experiment. She's going to look in it. I'm going to click her for anything she does with it. This is great mentally stimulating activity for your dogs. Right? Right, so then she can get in it and she can put all her feet in it, whatever. It's just an experimentation, a little papillon on the side there. And they all do it, right? Or you can use lure and reward. You know, you can, if you have puppies, use the lure to get your behavior, then click for the completion and go ahead and give the treat. All right, so we're going to spend the rest of this time talking about the shaping the emotional piece that we call reactivity. You're going to work in short, successful sessions. You're going to use the appropriate training equipment. I'll always say, you know what, I don't care what combo you use, whether it's head collar, harness, buckle collar, whatever. I don't like it when we use chokes or prongs, and the reason is simply because they are more aversive types of equipment. Now, will I not work with a client who does this? No, of course, I will help them to shape the dog's behavior so that we don't need those pieces of equipment anymore. Correct value of reinforcement. You want to use a high rate of reinforcement, and you're going to break up the behavior into smaller pieces. Every new environment you step into with your dog, I want you to think about, you're going to get a fallen behavior. That is just the way it is. And I used to say that at the vet all the time. They'd bring their dog, they'd try to get him up on the scale, and they'd say to the dog, all right, sit. And the dog's like, I can't sit in this little black thing, I just can't do it. And I'd say, you know how to sit. But they can't do it because that behavior has not been generalized. So you always expect a fallen behavior when you move into a new environment. Stop practicing the unsuccessful behavior. You would think that that would be obvious, but sometimes it's not, because we keep crossing our fingers that it won't happen again, right? So it's not as obvious as it appears to be. 100% attention is paid to the dog. I can remember teaching my reactive dog classes. And of course, in the beginning, they're all intent because they're afraid the dog's going to go off at other dogs, and they're working hard. And by, week 6, they're all like talking to the assistants behind their barrier. And I say, well, how come you're not working? And they say, well, I am working. The dog's being good. And I say, well, it doesn't matter. You have to pay 100% attention to your dog. End the session on a positive note, and make sure to keep the data. It feels really horrible when we've had a really good, spell of having really good interactions with people, dogs, etc. And the one time your dog decides, you know what, I don't like that, and then they bark, they lunge. That feels so much worse, even though you've had 6 months of success, right? So it's really important to keep the data. And if you don't want to keep training notes, just take a calendar. On a good day, put a smiley face. On a bad day, put a dog paw print. Because you have to remember, all the behaviors that your dog is doing is natural for their species. Not appropriate in our human world, but it is appropriate for their species, right? So that's why I want to always remind all of us that it's dog behavior. It's who they are, right? We just have to help them live with us the way we want them to, function. So the click to calm comes in 3 stages. And we're going to be able to, touch the tip of the iceberg here, right? But the stage 1 we're going to acknowledge, let's say, and I'm going to use the example of my dog's not great with other dogs, because it's very common. And you can use, this works the same no matter what stimulus you're working with, okay? I need them to get comfortable looking at other dogs before they can meet them, if they're ever going to meet them. But I will say, to have a dog that looks normal in the outside world, right, they have to get used to looking at other dogs. So they have to get comfortable looking. Stage 2 is them making the decision to disengage from the sight of the other dog to work with you instead, and it has to be done voluntarily, right? I mean, in my dog training community, I see a lot of different procedures on how this is done, and I see everything from don't look at the dog, trying to body block. The problem with that is, you're going to do a lot of body blocking if you decide to go to, a dog walk or something. You're going to go take your dog on, or you're going to go into, a doggy sport of some kind, right? They have to decide to look at you voluntarily. And we're not going to keep them so busy, right? Because I've also heard that, well, if you keep the dog busy, they're not going to focus on the other dog. The problem with that is you're building anxiety. Because if you're teaching your dog that, okay, there's a dog, okay, do puppy push-ups, sit down, sit down, sit down, sit down. Your dog, you can get to the point where the dog sees a dog in there begging you, please give me something to do. Please, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I can't sit still, right? You don't want that. You want your dog to learn to look and then do a behavior, right? And then you can insert what you want after they acknowledge you and they turn and voluntarily give you some eye contact. I will tell you a quick story. When I was a vet tech years ago, I didn't realize that we saw snakes until one came in its little pillowcase, and they set it on the exam table. And I thought, ooh, what is that? It's slithering, it looks weird, it's moving funny. We had to treat them because they would come in with these serious burns on their body. But in the beginning, I felt very uncomfortable near them. One side of my brain is saying, yes, Emma, it's an animal, they deserve medical attention too, doesn't matter what they look like, et cetera, et cetera. Then the other half of my brain is saying, yeah, but it looks really weird and I've never been around them. So I will tell you, I did my fair share of looking from a distance, getting a little closer, a little closer, a little closer, until finally one of the techs said, here, why don't you hold the opposite end of the head? And I said, okay. So little by little by little, I had to get used to the presence of that animal first before I could treat it. Dogs are the same way. For whatever reason, and I believe they have good reasons, if they don't want to be near other dogs, it's because they're uncomfortable with them in some way. So they have to get used to the presence first before you start, getting them closer. So we're going to click and treat the dog for looking at the dog. Hearing the dog. Big payday if another dog went after Ben or looked at him funny. Or if the object of interest reacts towards the dog. Here, the object of interest we're using is another dog. Threshold, your perfect threshold. I always say have your threshold where the dog can look. And it's usually when the dog is curious but not overreacting. I call it sticky head. I'm going to show you what it looks like. This is a client I went into. This dog is, I'm just going to show you a little piece of this. He is, just so you know, he's clicking and feeding his dog for looking at his friend Dave. Because for whatever reason, this dog is not comfortable with Dave. He is, then he's not. He is, then he's not. So we used him as a good example. So what happens is he's going to get out to the end of his leash and he's going to look. And that's what I call sticky head. But you're going to see him, he's going to click when he looks, and then he's going to swing him around, and then also click him for the returning eye contact. So let me just show you a little bit of this. Whoops. And I'm just sitting there with my video as I'm doing the visit. And I shake off. There's Dave.
Back up.
Threshold too high.
Click.
Too high again.
Yeah.
But watch how that starts to get shaped.
Click, back up. Pretend he's never seen Dave in his entire life.
No, exactly.
Yeah, he's not, he wants to see him, but he's not like excited seeing him. Click. Good.
See how nice that was?
Remember, wagging tail is a sign of stress. It is not necessarily a greeting behavior. Back up.
Yeah.
Too high again.
If they say, oh, the tail was wagging, I put my hand out, and they get crunched. Click. Good, there you go.
That was a nicer one.
Same dynamic.
Going to offer a sit. I will pay you for that. Good job.
Click. Yeah, he's still a little stiff.
Yeah. He's gonna
Click. Oh.
And that was a perfect one. That was and there's Dave. Poor Dave. So then, clicking and feeding them for, oh wait, too far, there we go. So then you click and feed them for looking at the thing that they're uncomfortable with, and then you're going to give them lots of reinforcement for looking back at the handler. So let me just show you what this looks like and show you how I usually teach it. So the ratios are this. I'm going to give you 1 click and 1 cookie for looking at the thing. Dog, person, etc. I'm going to give you 1 click and 1 cookie. But if you look back at me, I'm going to give you 1,000,000 cookies. There's no secret number to 5. I just know if I say to my clients, you know what, I want you to pay more for clicking. If I want you to pay more for clicking looking back at you, they'll say, okay, I'll give them an extra treat. No, I want them to give a lot of extra treats. Okay? So there's no magic number with 5. It just means that, you know what, I want there to be this much reinforcement for looking back at me and this much reinforcement for looking at the dog, person, squirrel, whatever it is. So I'm just going to show you a couple of videos with Caden. So when I have clients, I have them first practice with a cookie on the floor. This, I'm going to fast forward it right here, you're going to see it. That's a target, and that has a treat on it that he wants. Because in the context, he is going to want that other dog, right? He's going to want to pull towards the other dog. So that's why I have them practice with that, because there's a threshold there. And I will show you, this is a 1-to-1. And I want you to look carefully at his head, because he'll look, then he'll look, but then you'll see it almost looks like he's learning to just turn his head, because he'll look there, look here, and then he'll look, and then I make sure that I click the real look, not him experimenting with how his head is moving. Because you'll see that in this video. I just took that just to keep him with me a little bit, shaping it. Those are all real. Okay, that's exactly what I mean. So that little cookie on the plate is representative of another dog. So now the difference is going to be, and I want you to see the difference because this is like the whole reason you come here, is I am going to have the 1-to-1. You look at the dog, you look at me, you look at the dog. I call that bouncing. Bouncing from this to that. Then what's going to happen is voluntarily he is going to look at the plate, and then he's going to turn back on his own, and then I'm going to click that. It's a subtle difference, but I always say the power is in the subtlety. But take a look at this and see if you can see it. That's a bounce. And again, I'm not going to take this. I'm going to wait until he full on turns and looks back at me, and I'm going to give him tons of cookies. All right, he makes a decision. He looks, but then he makes a decision to look back at me. So again, lots of cookies for that. Did everybody see that difference? And I'm not saying his name. I'm not trying to help him. He is making that decision on his own. All right, so that's what that looks like. Now, I transfer that. Once I practice that, I transfer it into a real life situation. This is my friend Fran. This is her dog Dovey. I have a fence up there just in case if Caden should lunge forward, just in case. But he starts, you're going to hear a little bit of a vocalization from him because he sees the dog. But then he's going to say, oh, this is that game again. So take a look at this. Clicking only for looking. Okay, short session. I want to get my short session and get out of there. This is a really nice example. I was teaching a workshop in Missouri, and this is a really nice use of a verbal marker. So I just want to show you this in case you have to use a verbal marker. Actually, let me just, I was talking as I want you to hear her. She uses yip. That's her verbal marker. And her dog's looking at other dogs. That's what her issue is.
Beautiful.
Right? So again, dog making the decision to look back. So when I introduce the concept to clients, I work with novel stimulus first. So with Anne, way back when we were doing work with Sophie, this is what her session looked like.
Nice, Anne.
I have my little bunny out there.
Click.
A lot of times the clicks were late here. That's why you hear me going click. But she still did better. And this is real time with when this dog came into the training facility. This dog has like an eye for detail. She just wants to go into everything. So actually even this behavior is better than she came in. But she starts offering more sitting, looking, yeah, right there.
Yes.
Right? So much better. And then this is Caden, another way that we do it. Again, just another novel stimulus, right? Cookie on a plate, little thing. So now that the movement and the music is stopped, I'll go closer. Right? So just playing with that. So I learn how to hold my leash, how to dispense the cookies, how close to get, how not close to get. All that has to be figured out before you go out there with real dogs or people, right? You need to figure all that out. It's an easy way to do it. The other thing to think about is I like you to stay moving. You don't have to, Anne wasn't, but moving is preferred. Because if you are moving, you get into a pattern, the dog gets into a pattern, and actually it helps with your session. So let me just show you some lateral movement. Lateral basically means I'm going to have the stimulus here, and I'm going to walk back and forth on the same invisible line, as opposed to going over the threshold. Let me just show you what that looks like. Again, you see the cookie on the plate there. I'm going to keep her at that threshold. I'm just going to walk her back and forth across that line. I'm not going to move in. I'm going to click her for looking at it. Right? So a horizontal line versus I come in and away. Put that up a little so you can see. I'm going to come up, click. My treat placement's going to be back to let off pressure. And you can do it either way. Either way works. All right? Either way works. But you always have to pay careful attention to your threshold. And the bottom line is that if you go over your threshold, you just think, okay, I went over, I need to back up, and I need to, again, work more coming in. How to give reinforcement. It is important how you give reinforcement. Your treat placement. If you feed to the mouth, I mean, you certainly can feed to the mouth, but if you drop it on the floor, the dog calms down that much faster. And I think the reason is because their head is here and they have to drop their head. And the time it takes for them to drop their head and eat, and the head to come back up, it actually calms the dog down doing that much faster. I know when I used to work at Yankee Golden Retriever Rescue, with some of these dogs that just are always on you, jumping up, I would have crunchy dog bones. And I would actually click when they have 4 feet on the floor, toss the cookie on the floor, and the time it takes for them to crunch, they weren't as, they'd whip their head back up, but they weren't, usually on me, right? And I would just keep, with every step, click and toss the dry bone. Toss the dry, so again, a lot of crunching. All that crunching calms down the brain. Licking also works well. So, some of my students use like a food tube as a pacifier, right? So if you take a little food tube, you go REI or any of these sporting stores, although they have been telling me that you can get them at TJ Maxx too in the travel section. But basically it's a tube that's empty and you fill it with whatever concoction you would like. So some of my students use some really gross stuff like liver juice or some kind of weird thing. But again, whatever, it's nice and contained, right? So, but you have to teach your dog to eat out of it. But you just, flip the lid, let them learn how to eat. And then you can use it at the times where, it may be that your dog is good in normal circumstances now, but let's say, I don't know, a dog gets loose on a trail or you're hiking or something, and you say, uh-oh, I don't know what to do. So you end up, getting the food tube out, getting your dog interested in hiding behind a rock or something, right? Because we talk about all those things too. Try to have no shredding treats, because that's just annoying. To toss a piece of chicken and have like 5 things come out. And the reason for that is I want my students to practice perfect training loops, right? And if you click for a nice behavior and then the treat shreds, then now your dog's really getting reinforced for just eating off the ground, which I don't want. Right? I want the dog to know, yep, that was my reinforcement for this. I pick it up, I give you attention again. I click, yep, I got this and this, right? So I just want to make sure that, you don't take a treat that splatters everywhere. So the end result is the presence of that thing. Again, I just call it an object of interest here. And the environment becomes the cue to look at you. So if you have worked this training equation the way we talked about, what you're going to get is you're going to be walking with your dog on the street. Let's say it's not great with other dogs on the street. And your dog will see a dog and they will look at you instead of barking and lunging at the end of your line. You need to insert alternate or incompatible behaviors, but your dog has to know what those are, right? You have to train those and make sure they're reliable before you actually use them in this training equation, okay? And that's what I love about this, because this is all voluntary on the dog's part, right? You don't have to talk your dog into it. You don't have to say a dog's name 50 million times. They just say, yep, every time I see a dog, that is what I do, is I look at you. Or maybe your dog's not great with strangers and some person starts to go ahead and reach for your dog and they say, oh, nope, I don't like that. Where's my mother? Where's my father? I'm going to go find them and tell them. Because that's what the dogs do, right? They're doing it because they think they're going to get a reinforcement, which of course in the very beginning they're totally going to get reinforcement. Oh, I'd much rather have that than lunging and biting, right? They will come and find you. Right? And it's funny, when I first wrote my book, people in the middle of the US would write to me and say, this works so good for the deer. This looks so good for whatever, wild animal, because my dogs chase them. And now they see the deer and they come run into me for cookies, which is, and I'm thinking, okay, great. That's not why I wrote the book, but that's great. All right. All right, so let me just show you a couple of other examples of how we use this. But it's all, so this is a boxer and they're being exposed to a dog at the other side of the room. He's a dog reactive dog. Show you a little bit of this.
Yep.
Dog is at the end looking at the dad, and then, yeah, that's the dog looking at the other dog. I believe there's a neutral dog here. Usually in this class what we do is we start with a neutral dog and then these dogs start looking at each other. So every time the dog looks down there, we're going to click and give a cookie. There she did turn the head away because sometimes they get sticky head going, so that's okay. But there's about 7 dogs in that room, so she's just taking whatever he bounces off of.
Nice.
And let's see if did I show what she's looking at down there? Yeah, no, I never go back. I think it's a neutral dog that, or we do something like this. And again, keep in mind, these are all dog reactive dogs. They're more advanced. We play things like musical chairs and musical barriers and all that kind of thing. This day we're doing chairs. So now they're all in close proximity to each other. They're just with their person. And again, everybody's cueing off everybody else that I have to stay with my person when there's other dogs around instead of barking and lunging at them. And the girl with the black and tan dog, that's my Boston student who can now go for walks and not have a problem. Okay. Here's another one. I'm going to, go back. This is just, again, another example. They're out in just a parking lot. This is Jess and Maggie. Maggie's not good with other dogs. And this is back when we were doing 1-to-1 reinforcement. But now that we're doing 1-to-5, it makes that behavior happen so much faster. Dog's pretty close. Before I couldn't get that close. And again, notice she's walking the side of the dog. They're not coming head to head because that's the hardest exposure to do. We build up, as you saw in the last one, to head to head. Okay? So that's what that looks like. And the last thing I want to just bring up before I let you go, one thing I want to just make mention before I talk about this real quick is you're going to get what you reinforce. So if you were to stay at stage 1, which is clicking and feeding for looking at dogs, you're going to get now a dog that looks at dogs. Okay? So if you stay at stage 1, this is what you get. If I'm the dog, this is what you're going to get. A dog that goes out and does this. That's what the dog's going to do. Because the dog's gotten paid for looking at dogs. They're not barking, they're not lunging, but that's what happened with Audrey and Chad. And I said to her, after a while, I said to her, are you not working on eye contact? And she said, you know what? I'm really not. Because she said, it feels so good to walk out in Cambridge and Boston to have a dog that just looks straight ahead and is not barking or lunging at any dog. And she took a little GoPro thing for me, right? She put it on her head and she walked down the street on one of her walks. And you can see Chad out in front and he's just going, looking at things happening. But I said to her, don't you want eye contact? And she says, well, I suppose. I said, no, you need eye contact. So it's funny, fairly recently, she really started to pile on the reinforcement. And so I saw her like literally, I think it was like 2 weeks ago. And we were over at Surefire Dogs there and we were working on these pieces. And it's funny, I saw her, I haven't seen her in a while. And I said to her, oh my gosh, he's looking at you all the time. She says, yeah, I've been working on stage 2. I said, okay, you're doing 1-to-5? She says, no, I'm working on 1 to 10 and 20. But what was really interesting is the more dogs will do what they're reinforced for. So the more you pile on that reinforcement for looking voluntarily back at you, it's going to happen that much faster. It worked 1-to-1. In the book, it's 1-to-1. It definitely worked 1-to-1. But again, the speed is going to happen that much faster if you put in more reinforcement. The other piece about that, if you talk to your dog at the same time, that was so great. I can't believe it. Look how good you're being. Blah, 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 blah. So what do you think happens now? Your verbals take on the power of the reinforcement, and now your verbal praise means that much more. Okay, so these are all these nuances that I want you to be aware of. Last thing, I know it's a little bit over time, but last thing that I just want you to think about for just if you have dogs that you're working with, think about the absence of your eye contact. The reason why I want you to think about that is because a lot of times we look at our dogs when we train them. And that's fine. We have to look at them when we train them because we have to know whether behavior happens or not. But as I have these students who are doing this, and they've done it for a while, the dogs are getting better, the last step I do is say, okay, now I have to have your eyeballs off the dog. Because then you walk around like this all the time. And I don't want you to do that. I want you to be able to look down, look away, look down, look away. The problem is that if you get the dog used to your eyeballs all the time, it's one more contextual cue that the dog relies on. Quick story with Ben. Started taking him to regular obedience classes. It's the winter time. I have him in a sit. There are dogs all over, right? But I have him in a sit. Stay. I take off my scarf. I turn to hang it up. And this is what I hear. And so I look, and I'm looking at these other dogs. Who did that to him? And I'm giving them cookies. Oh, Ben, I'm sorry, honey. Yeah, good boy. I'm glad you stayed in your sit. Take off the coat. I turn. And this time I go like this, and this is what I see. And I turn around. And, not me. Well, that wasn't me. I don't know what's happening. And I'm like, you little, I didn't, you know. And I'm like, okay. And for me, it's always, okay, it's my back. When I turn my back, he's not used to that context, right? And what I found when I experimented is my eyes. He's used to me staring at him. Now he'll do what I want, he'll do what we've learned when I'm looking at him, but when I take the eyes away and I'm looking, he's looking out, probably to see what he can get into, right? So very easy to shore that up. I just, again, follow some of these things. I click, and instead of staring at them, I click and I give them a cookie. With my students, I say, have your dog, talk to somebody at home, have cookies. Just just feeding them. Because now they understand that the window of reinforcement is open, whether your eyes are on them or not. Right? So you change the context. I tend to do this just on purpose with my Golden at home. Or I compete with an agility because when I'm in agility, I'm forever doing this because I'm looking at the course and I'm thinking, all right, what do I need to do for this? And and so the whole time he's just like, yep, I'm happy, right? Although he's really not a food-motivated dog, really. It's funny, when he was a baby, he worked for water. Go figure. I have the food here, I have the water here. He does a nice piece of agility. I click, we come running, and I say, okay, let me give you the cookies, and he's like, this is him. He's pointing to the water bowl. I'm like, really? Put in the water, here you go, and then he wanted a cookie. But he always went to the water first. He's funny. But let me show you what I mean with this, and then I will wrap up. And I'm available for questions later if you want. So this is a dog that I'm working with. This is a dog that is not stranger friendly at all. And I had to keep I had to have a wide berth with him originally. Him and I, this is one of the owners, talked to him, came up with a plan. You're going to see exactly what we talked about. But my thing I want you to watch is watch when I say to him, you look at me too. When he releases his eyes, watch what the dog does.
That again. Come up, click.
And now I'm closer, right? So I'm coaching him.
Good, lovely. Come up.
Dog looks at me. Because I'm over there behind the gate. Because, again, safety.
Come up. Good. The next time you come up, I want you to let him look at me, but I want you to get that click in the minute he looks at me. So come on up. Now wait.
Now watch.
And you look at me too.
Watch. He looks. Dog looks.
Right there. Go back.
Right? Because they release from the eye contact. They're used to holding behavior, so that's typical. And this is why I don't like things, having your dog sit when somebody comes in the door. Because it's usually very, very, it never works really well. Because you have to teach the dog to do a sit-stay and wait there while that distraction level goes up to the ceiling and while your back is turned. Because the minute you do a sit-stay, let's say you say sit, stay, the minute your back turns and then you add distraction, the dog is up and out. Or the dog is up and forward, right? So I just want you to be aware of that. Okay. This is my website. It's really easy. emmaparsons.com. If you have any questions after today, you can absolutely, there's a little contact thing there. You can just click on it. You can email me directly with emma@emmaparsons.com, or you can do the website. And lastly, as I always do with every talk that I do, thank you to Ben, because without Ben, I would not have learned any of this. So thank you all for listening today. I appreciate it.